Greetings. Welcome to Eric's Angle, the podcast for Iowa State mathematics students. I am your host, Eric Weber, chair of the mathematics department. Today's guest earned a BS from our program in 1978. His name is Bob Antol, and he is a retired senior software engineer from IBM. Bob is passionate about astronomy to the point that he built an observatory attached to his house. Photos of Bob's observatory hang in the Sprague Lounge here in Carver Hall. Please welcome Bob Antol. Hi, Bob. Welcome to Eric's Angle. Thanks for joining me.
And thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's introduce you to our audience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Bob Antol. I graduated from Iowa State with a bachelor's in mathematics. And right after I graduated, I started my job at IBM in East Fishkill, New York, where I was in an organization called the Electronic Design Automation, which is short EDA. And the purpose of EDA was to develop a suite of software tools that would give IBM designers a competitive edge so that any chips that were provided would be far exceeding any chips that would be provided by our competitors using any software that they were using. So our software is proprietary. It's used by IBMers only. The types of chips and where they are employed, where they're used, are next generation computing machines, ATM machines. A while ago, they were in video cameras and in game boxes. And if anyone is familiar with Jeopardy, and there was a computer on Jeopardy playing Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter by the name of Watson. Well, Watson, the chips inside Watson were designed by our tool suite, the tool suite from EDA. So that is what I did at IBM. Other things about me, in 1985, I was on an expedition to the North Pole. So I stood on top of the world. It was a fantastic experience. And, people always ask me, was it cold or how cold was it? And I say, well, like, for example, this last Iowa winter, you guys may have had 30 degrees below zero, but the weatherman always says wind chill. Well, I experienced sustained, the coldest was 35 below without the wind. There was no wind. This is 35 degrees below. And then you add in the wind, you're talking 50 or 60 below. The North Pole had a temperature of 20 below, and at the northernmost community of Inuits, an Inuit is an Eskimo, but they don't like to be called Eskimos because Eskimo means eater of raw flesh. So the northernmost community of Inuits, they constructed an igloo, and this was the land of the midnight sun, so it was sunny 24 hours a day. I was able to sleep out overnight in an igloo, and inside the igloo, it was a comfortable 10 degrees below zero. So that's kind of a highlight summary of my trip to the North Pole. In the mid 2000s, it was around 2003, I started thinking about what I would like to have in an observatory. So I designed it in my mind. And then my wife and I sat down with an architect, and the architect designed for us, and we went back and forth an observatory on paper. And then we hired, in 2005, we hired a builder who actually built in 4 months' time from start to finish. And we now have a new addition onto our house. And in the corner of that addition is an octagonal tower. And mounted on this octagon is an ash dome observatory, which rotates 360 degrees in either direction. There are two aperture doors that open up, all remotely controlled. And in the center of the observatory is a 14.5-inch Ritchie-Chrétien telescope, which is mounted on a Paramount ME robotic mount, which is mounted on a 2-foot diameter concrete pier, which goes 5 feet into the ground. And no part of the building, first floor, second floor, no part of the building touches that pier. So the telescope is completely isolated from any vibrations that we may induce due to our movements. So it's actually a fantastic setup. We love the observatory. So you can probably tell astronomy is a hobby of mine. And then in the late 2000 teens, of 2017, I was the host of a radio program called the Astronomical Almanac, where I basically started out with basic information about astronomy, teaching the listeners. And I would talk about what's up in the sky this week and try to just get people interested in astronomy. I have been retired for 10 years, and my hobbies include reading and, of course, astronomy. I have a workshop in the basement where I do woodworking, and then I love to work outside, both winter and summer. Of course, what do you do in the winter except shovel snow or blow snow? But summertime, I just love to be outside. So, in a nutshell, that's basically a little bit about me.
Well, that was quite a lot, actually. North Pole Observatory, all of that. Wow, that's impressive. So let's go back to the first part of your story there, graduating from Iowa State with a bachelor's degree in math and then going on to IBM. So how did you feel that your math degree prepared you for your career?
All right, so I loved mathematics. When I first started Iowa State, I loved mathematics. I loved entomology. I loved botany. I loved biology. I loved zoology. And I was taking all of these classes. And then it became readily apparent that you can't keep taking all these classes. You can have double majors, triple majors, but I had to finally make a decision, and the decision was quite easy. I was going to major in mathematics because I loved mathematics. So I had in my mind a career trajectory, and I worked with my advisor, and I told him, this is what I want to do. I want to get a bachelor's in math, and then I want to come back. I want to get a master's in math, and then I want to come back and I want to get a doctorate, and I want to teach math at Iowa State. That was the trajectory that I was on. My advisor knew this, and it was like, this is the path that I'm going to be taking. And I was taking a lot of math classes, and my advisor said, you really need to round out. Iowa State did have its requirements on getting a degree, but my advisor said, you really need to round out your education. So he said, like do introduction to third world cultures, music, speech, philosophy, those types of things. And then he said, I recommend that you minor in computer science. I was like, I don't like computers. I mean, that's not my thing. But I said, I'll listen to you and I'll go ahead and I'll minor in computer science. So in my senior year, interviewers were coming to the campus, and I heard all these stories about interviewers asking these questions that they tried to stump you, and giving you tests. And I thought, wow, this could be kind of fun. Well, are these just stories, or is it actually like this? So I said, I'm going to start interviewing for the fun of it. So I would go to the interviews and just see what it is that they were asking. Well, one day I had selected the IBM Corporation, and this guy, he's interviewing me, a really nice guy, and I'm answering all his questions. And at the end of the session, he said, would you like to come out to New York to see our labs? I thought, wow, a trip to New York. Why not? I mean, I already know what I'm going to be doing, but okay, I'll go out to New York. So I got on a plane and came out to New York, and I interviewed with six, they're called first line managers. The guy that did the interview was the boss, so he was the second line manager. So I interviewed with these six managers, and they were telling me what they did, and I thought, wow, this is actually kind of fascinating. So at the end of the day, after all six interviews were over, I went back to the guy that had come out to Iowa State, and he said, we'd like to hire you. And I thought, what? I always thought that you'd go back and then you'd get a letter that either said, thank you very much, but no, or, you get the letter later, but he's right there. He said, we'd like to hire you. So he wrote down on a piece of paper, he says, here, this is what your starting salary would be. And I went, oh, okay. So I went back to Iowa State and I went to my advisor and I said, I have a little conundrum here. You know what my career trajectory is? And he says, yep, I know exactly what you want to do, and we're getting you set up to do that. So I said, so I interviewed with IBM out in New York, and I went out there and they asked me to work out there. And he's like, oh, okay, what do you think? And I said, well, and then I showed him the piece of paper with the starting salary, and his eyes got kind of big, and he said, I've been here for 10 years and I'm not making that amount. So all of a sudden, greed kind of entered into the picture, and I'm going, oh, so I said, I don't know what to do. So he said, well, it's rather obvious. He says, why don't you take the job, try it out for a year? And if you don't like it, quit, come back here. We'll take you. We'll get you back on the right path. I said, man, that's really obvious. I don't know why I didn't think about that. So that's why he was an advisor. So I said, okay. So 2 weeks after the graduation, I was in my car driving out to New York, and I started the job. And well, a year went by, 2 years went by, 35 years went by, and I was still at my job in EDA. I started in the EDA organization at IBM, and that was the organization that I was in for my entire career. And I would periodically go back to Iowa State and I would see my advisor and I would tell him how things were going. But that's how it ended up, from studying math with that all important minor in computer science to ending up at IBM.
Wow. That's a fascinating story. I had a little bit of an opposite experience in terms of academia because I went to grad school thinking I was going to go into academia, and then as I was finishing up, I wasn't sure. Maybe I would rather go into industry, and I got a postdoc position, and I did that thinking I'll give it a try, see if I like it. If I don't like it, then I have multiple options in industry, and it turns out I did like it in academia, so I stayed. So it's kind of like the same thing, but on the flip
Yeah.
side.
Yeah, it's funny the way life comes at you, right?
Yeah. So, in your role at IBM, how much coding did you actually end up doing?
Well, that's an interesting question. So in my 35 years, I really had just four, believe it or not, four primary responsibilities over the 35-year period. When I first got there, I dove into the coding. Now, interesting, all of my classes, all the things that they teach you, you get to IBM and they have a new language. IBM is famous for this. It was a proprietary language. Nobody else had it, and you had to learn a brand new syntax, a brand new language. But I began coding into this with this new language, and I became an expert in the data model, so to speak. And my next job after the coding was I became an application engineer, where I would go out to different sites, IBM sites around the world, and I would teach them how to use our code, but also having the expertise into this model when something would go wrong, and this was back in the day where we didn't have Zoom sessions, we didn't have basically the capability to do things except by telephone. I would actually fly to these different sites and I would have to debug and then fix. I'd have to actually go down to the bit level and, twist a few bits here and there to fix the data so that the engineers could get back on their feet and continue. So, the coding helped me to get to the second job of being able to repair the data. So yeah, there was coding, but interestingly, as I said, it was a proprietary language. And then later on in the career, then IBM began using the languages that everybody uses.
So you knew going in that you probably would end up doing some coding, and that taking these computer science classes, this minor, maybe helped you with some of the concepts of software design and so forth. How did your math degree help inform your work while you were at IBM?
That's I think everybody asks about themselves when they are a math major and they go out into industry, for example. It's like, how much do you use your math degree? Well, here's the thing. Mathematics forms the mind into a way of looking at how to solve problems. There's an analytical approach to solving problems that basically mathematics helps you. If you didn't have the math background, there's always problems. Problems always have to be solved, but the mathematics allows you to look at things in a manner that I think only mathematicians can do. So when you're looking at debugging problems, and if you recall, I had said I was a math major. I didn't want to take computer science, but my advisor advised me to, which of course his advisement got me this job at IBM. I was never that interested in computers or in programming, but that was my job, and mathematics did actually help. Now, in terms of using the advanced mathematics that I had been taking or that I knew, my particular job didn't require that, but just the fact that the analytical approach that one uses with solving math problems really helped out when it came to solving computer problems. So you did end up using your math skills in that respect.
And where do you see current math majors, like what are the opportunities for them that you see right now?
Okay, so opportunities for current math majors. The way I would look at that and what I would tell current math majors is number one, first of all, listen to your advisor. Your advisor knows an awful lot. You might think, what does this advisor know? So do listen to your advisor. Number two, I would say, remember, mathematics will be your friend. It'll always be your friend. You may be in a non-mathematics field, but every field that you go in will have a problem. There are always problems. It'd be nice if there was a job that didn't have problems. Every job has a problem. So problems need to be solved. And I think the mathematical mind is what is going to aid and assist in solving those problems. So just remember that math will always be your friend. Number three is a friend of mine gave me a pin 40 some years ago. And I'm just going to pull this up here. Let's see. Can you read that? It says, math is not a spectator sport. And that is so true. Math is not a spectator sport. You will be applying your math. Just because you have that math degree doesn't mean that, okay, it's sitting back there. No, it's not a spectator sport. You will be using that. And I want to give a little side story here, and then I'll come back to your question. The side story is I was taking a partial differential equations class, and the instructor was talking, and I'm looking around the room, and every face in that room looked like, what is he talking about? And I thought, okay, it's not just me. We were all kind of confused. So I had to attribute it to the fact that it's not that the subject matter is difficult, it's the fact that the instructor was having a difficult time in getting the point across as to, what he wanted to say. So I took matters into my own hand because math isn't a spectator sport. And I went out and I got another book on partial differential equations and I studied it on my own through another book. And all of a sudden it just fell right into place. So when the time came for the finals, uh, tests were handed out, and I'm looking and I'm going, oh boy, this is nice. This is easy. I answered the questions in detail, explaining how I would go from one step to another, just bing, bing. And at the end, it was about a half hour. I finished. I walked up the center of the room and I put it down on the professor's desk and I looked around. Everybody else was still like scratching their heads and wondering, oh my gosh. And I thought, well, I sure hope I did that right. And in the end, it turns out I aced the exam because I went out on my own and I studied this because I didn't really like the approach the instructor was taking. So the undergraduates that are wondering, okay, what can I do with my math degree? Just keep all these points in mind, and you can do an awful lot with a math degree, right? I mean, if you want to be a teacher, that was my original goal. You can teach at the elementary school level, the junior high level, the senior high level, the college level. If you don't want to do the teaching, you could go into research. You can go into insurance. You can go into the actuarial sciences. You could be an economist. Every single corporation, they are always dealing, or they have to deal with mathematics in some respect. So I think out of all of the base classes that one could take or what you could graduate in, I think mathematics is probably one of the best things that you could choose. And you have to remember, not everybody likes mathematics. You either like it or you don't like it. I don't think there's any in between ground. So if you are a math major, then you're part of that group that likes the mathematics. And I think it's going to help you out in any job that you go forward to.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I like to say to people is I've never heard the saying, I wish that person knew less mathematics.
That's right. No,
No.
you won't hear that. No,
Yep. Always knowing more mathematics is helpful.
that's right. And remember this as well. Mathematics is like anchovies. You either love anchovies or you hate anchovies. You love mathematics or you hate mathematics. I don't think there's any in between ground between the two.
Yes, that seems to be my experience as well. So,
Yeah.
Bob, this was fantastic. I appreciate you appearing.
Thank you very much for having me. This was actually quite enjoyable, and I hope that the undergraduates that may be watching this get a better feeling for the fact that did I go in the right direction? I like math. Am I going to be okay when I graduate and finally have to get a job? The answer is yes, you're going to be fine, and I hope this helps them out.